everyone, welcome to our video on audience. I'm not going to record videos for all of the chapters that we read or things that we talk about, but I will for some of the more important ones. An audience is probably the most important one. Everything that we do as technical writers is driven by audience. It matters who we're writing to so that we know how to design what we're writing, what vocabulary we use when we're writing. I think even more than other types of writing, technical writing is driven by audience. I think your book does a great job talking about audience. I just wanted to add a little bit more from my writing teaching perspective. There are three types of audiences that we think about for writing. The first is our intended audience, the second is the implied audience, and the last is our actual audience. So intended audience, that's exactly what it sounds like, right? The people that you are writing to, and that's really what the chapter that you're going to read focuses on, is all about how do you define who that audience is, how do you keep them in mind as you're writing. It's essential that your audience understands what you're saying, doesn't feel talked down to, and can follow things and doesn't have to come back and ask you questions, right? That's our goal, right? Is always to make it so that it's just they understand it, right? The second level, though, the implied audience, is also important and interesting. So intended audience is who we know is going to read it. The implied audience is a group that is probably going to read it, right? But isn't maybe who we're directing it to. So here's a situation, right? So let's say you work for a financial services firm and your job is to take the information from the financial analysts and accountants or whatever the finance people are and send that information to clients or other people who maybe don't have the financial background that you and or the financial gurus do. So your intended audience is this group that needs you to dumb things down, right? Or, put it in layman's terms. But your implied audience is probably the group whose information you're interpreting, right? Maybe also your boss, right? People that are going to check it over. Maybe not all the time, maybe not every time, but a lot of the time they're going to want to take a look at it and just make sure that you got it right. And so I always say, our job as technical writers is to build relationships between groups of people. And that's really what we're thinking about when we think about our implied and our intended audience. Is our job is to communicate between those two groups of people and to make sure that everyone understands everyone else and that we don't make anybody too mad or too confused. It's a balancing act and it can be annoying sometimes, but unfortunately, it's kind of what we have to do. So you always should keep that implied audience in mind as well. Is this, would anyone question this or be concerned that this is how I wrote this? And sometimes it means checking back with those technical people or the people whose information you're rewriting or revising in some way, and just make sure that it makes sense. The last group, of course, I mentioned is the actual audience, and the name is pretty clear, right? It's the people who actually end up reading it. And the thing about actual audience is that we never know for sure who it's going to be. I mean, we know the intended audience, or we hope anyways, the intended audience is going to read it. And we're pretty sure that the implied audience will read it on occasion. But you never kind of know who else might read things, For example, you might send things to, a group so maybe you work in IT and you guys just bought a new software, and once it's all installed, then it's your job to kind of write a training manual for the rest of the company or for a group that's going to be using the software, let's say. But you never know, that information might get sent up to the CEO or to the CIO or somebody who's just interested in reading it, or you never know, it could get smuggled out of the company, or there's always other people out there who might end up reading your work. I guess really we can't concern ourselves too much with actual audience because there's only so much we can control with that. But I guess it's kind of like the internet, right? Where we always say anything you write, no matter how secure you think it is, it's never secure, and you have to imagine that the entire world is going to read whatever it is that you're writing. that's kind of how we have to think anytime we write something publicly, in a business. I mean, even if it's a private business, you never know, right? I mean, somebody gets audited, whatever, your stuff can be read. And you just want to there's a big discussion in your book about being ethical and being responsible. And you want to be careful and be truthful with what you write, because you never know who's going to read it. And hey, if you do a good job, you might impress the right person and get some sort of cool promotion or cool job over it. All right, so that's my discussion today on audience. I hope you found it helpful. If you have any questions on anything that I talked about or anything that you read in the chapter, please email me or post it to the discussion boards, and then we can have a group chat about it. All right, talk to you soon.